The film starts with a man named Chiro walking in an area of Buenos Aires. Chiro is a thug, and when he sees a car of his own interest, he breaks into it. He goes inside and steals his stereo. He also finds a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses that's in the upper compartment and pockets them. Then, he feels that his work is finished and departs, but the door does not open. He tries the other 3 doors, but none of them open. Left with no choice, he moves over to the back seat. He attempts to get the car's trunk open. When he fails to do so, he begins to panic and tries desperately to break the car's window, but without success. The seasoned thug refuses to give up and dismantles the inner part of the car's door. He then squeezed his hand inside the door and tried to open it, but it only hurt him badly. He began to bleed, but the car door wouldn't open. After all had failed, Chiro pulls out his gun and shoots at the front window. The bullet bounced off and pierced into his thighs. Chiro screamed in extreme pain, profusely bleeding. He took off his shirt and wrapped it around the wound so far in order to avoid being seen, but after having shot himself in the foot, he tries to get the attention of someone on the outside to help him get out of the car, even if it meant he would go to jail. Luckily, a woman appears outside the car and begins to fix her makeup using the car window. Chiro tries to ask her for help, but appears that the woman outside the car can't see him inside. He yells at her, but the woman leaves without flinching. He tries to call his wife, but before the call could go through, the phone's battery dies. Several hours pass by, and he falls asleep. The next day, extremely thirsty, he is run out of water, and he is forced to lick the fog from the window out of desperation. Later, he takes out a car stereo from his bag and puts it back to listen to the radio. The radio plays his favorite song, and he gets lost in the music. For a moment, even if the song is raunchy, he forgets about his troubles. Ironically, the song describes Chiro's exact situation. It talks about foggy windows, reclined seats, and doing it all night. For some reason, the song motivates him to attempt opening the door again, and he gets at it, hitting it repeatedly with a tool. A phone started to ring. It was the car stereo. Chiro answered the call. Chiro answers the call, and a man speaks from the other end of the line. The man introduces himself as Dr. Enrique Ferrari and welcomes Chiro in the car. Dr. Ferrari continues that he is the owner of the car, and he has been robbed 28 times in his life. He adds that Chiro is the 29th thief who has tried to steal from him. The revelation enrages him. He demands to be freed, but Enrique tells him to shut up and listen. Enrique begins that he calls his car 4x4, which has an alarm that's connected to his phone. It uses which Enrique can lock all the doors to the car with it. It's bulletproof, so it can't be moved from inside because of active suspension, and soundproof. Moreover, the windows, including the front windshield, are all polarized. The only thing that's not bulletproof is the gas tank, which can hold 120 liters of fuel, and it is full at the moment. As Chiro hears in disbelief, Enrique continues that he is a widower who was born in Quilmes 60 years ago. Enrique says that his childhood was normal for a middle-class child at the time. His door was never locked. He now says that the current situation is in such bad shape that he misses his childhood. Enrique asks Chiro what he would do if he caught his son stealing. However, Chiro has had enough and threatens to report Enrique to the police. Chiro orders Enrique to release him so he can kill him and all of his family. However, before Chiro could finish, the phone hangs up. Afterward, Enrique turns on the air conditioner and takes it to the lowest temperature to torture the thief. Chiro tries to turn off the AC, but without success. Left with no choice, Chiro takes off his shirt from his wound and wears it. He rips some of his jeans off and wraps them around his wound. Chiro again calls him and asks him what he would do if he caught his son stealing. He tells him that he will give him water if he answers the question correctly. Chiro answers the question, but it doesn't satisfy Enrique. Chiro pleads with him to stop, saying that he has learned his lesson. However, Enrique could care less. He again tells Chiro about an incident. He reveals that last December, 2 men broke into his daughter's home when she was parking her car. Enrique reveals that he trained his daughter for situations like this. She always avoids making eye contact and always has money prepared to hand out. But the training wasn't enough, and the robbers put a gun to Enrique's grandson for 3 hours. Chiro isn't interested in Enrique's stories. He asks him, what kind of a doctor deprives a wounded person of water? Enrique replies that it is the kind of doctor he is. Before hanging up, Chiro asks him to guess the kind of doctor he is before hanging up. A police car arrives and stops in front of his SUV. Chiro is again filled with hope and tries to get the attention of the policeman, but the policeman gives the SUV a ticket instead. Several hours later, Enrique calls again and asks, "What is your full name and your ID number?" in exchange for water. After Chiro complies, Enrique guides him to the water in the washer hose in the back of the vehicle. The water is light blue in color, but dehydrated. Chiro could care less and gulps the water. He sighed, relieved. However, he was still hungry and without food, so he was almost forced to eat one insect that had somehow made its way into the car. Later, he checked his wound and learned that it's turning yellow, and he also has a fever. Enrique decided to give him a break and turn on the air conditioning for him so he could cool down, and revealed that he was also sick. Enrique was dying of cancer, and the doctors told him that he had a year to live. As time passed, Chiro took off his clothes, which turned yellow as well. He passed out as well. His body had also turned yellow by later afternoon. Chiro went through the car manual trying to find a way to escape, but only found the page in sheer desperation and frustration. He ate its page in sheer desperation and frustration. Suddenly, things looked great for Chiro when an attempted robbery occurred at their car, giving him hope. However, the thief is spotted by a passerby and beaten up and given to the police. Soon, the night falls and dehydration and hunger turn him into a philosopher. The next day, Enrique calls him again and reads him the newspaper. Enrique is in a good mood, so he guides him to a hidden chocolate bar behind the brakes. After spending all day resting and observing people in the neighborhood, Chiro strikes on one of the doors until he strips down to its metal part from the inside. Eventually, he manages to create a small hole in the door that opens outside. Chiro screams through the tiny hole to attract someone's attention, but without success. Enrique calls him later that day and tells him that he has contacted Chiro's family. Hearing his family's name, Chiro gets upset and warns Enrique against harming them. He then tearfully asks what he did to deserve this. However, Enrique continues to push him, asking him what he did when he broke into the home of the Salerno brothers in Baraka to rob them, but they tried to fight back and Chiro shot them with his gun. Enrique also brings up an old bus driver whom Chiro beat up. Chiro still refuses to take responsibility for it, blaming the driver for not letting him rob the passengers. He adds that he made mistakes and has already paid for them. Later, Chiro charges his phone with solar power and calls his wife, but the call goes straight to voicemail. In the voicemail, he confesses to his wife everything and apologizes for messing up again. After crying his eyes out, he plays with the car's start button and manages to turn it on. Apparently, it can only be started without a key after pressing it a certain number of times. He puts on the seatbelt and places the gear in reverse mode. However, the gear gets stuck in reverse mode, forcing him to drive in reverse. He speeds the car and crashes it into a pole to attract people's attention. Fortunately, the airbag activates on time and he doesn't sustain any injury. Chiro is finally able to kick down the window and escape. He is in extreme pain, but he manages to drag himself to a nearby gas station eatery where he helped himself to some food. The eatery's manager orders him to pay for the food and leave immediately. This enrages Chiro and he shoots the manager. Then Chiro wakes up from his sleep and realizes that he was dreaming. He is still stuck in the car, so Enrique calls again and Chiro threatens to commit suicide, but it doesn't faze the former. Fed up, Chiro puts a gun to his mouth and pulls the trigger, but it gets stuck. Enrique laughs at the thief's misery and asks him to look in front of the car, finally revealing himself. Enrique gets in the car with him. Chiro is extremely tired and he doesn't even have the energy to escape. Enrique tends to his wound and, after Chiro seemingly falls asleep, Enrique gets distracted in a work call. Chiro unsuccessfully tries to shoot the deranged doctor, jumps out of the car, and fires a shot in the air to call for help. However, Enrique again gets to him and tries to drag him back to the SUV. A police officer spots the two and orders the doctor to drop his gun. 2 hours pass by as people, media, and police surround the area, but Enrique refuses to let Chiro go, saying he's the victim of a thief. After all fails to convince the police to call retired negotiator Julio Amado, who asked the doctor what he wanted. Enrique publicizes problems that he faces every day, but at least no one got hurt. Enrique says that while walking to his office, he had to avoid 2,000 dog poops on the street because dog owners don't clean after their pets when no one's looking. The public resonates with Enrique and they cheer for him. Julio doesn't give up and continues to talk to Enrique, eventually convincing him to let Chiro go. The police arrest Chiro. Enrique asks Julio to put down his weapon and surrender. Ignoring the request, Julio gets in his car and places a timer on top of his car. Thinking that it's a bomb, everyone takes cover. After a few moments, the SUV explodes, killing Enrique, but not before igniting a fire in every commoner's heart. And that's the end of the movie.